Right now, as you are watching this, a team of scientists is going through a data set that has never existed before in the history of Yellowstone National Park. At 5:09 in the morning, Mountain Daylight Time, on Saturday the 13th of June 2026, monitoring equipment in Biscuit Basin registered seismic energy and a low-frequency acoustic signal, infrasound, coming from the direction of Black Diamond Pool. 40 seconds later, a camera the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory had installed the previous May recorded a dark steam plume jetting out of the ground. As the sun rose, park staff noticed the Firehole River running milky gray for roughly 6 kilometers downstream. And here is the sentence from the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory that makes this genuinely unprecedented. The explosion occurred about 100 meters from a monitoring station installed in the summer of 2025, and no hydrothermal explosion has ever occurred this close to a monitoring station. Meanwhile, the observatory's monthly update issued on the 1st of August 2026 reports the volcano alert level as normal, the aviation color code as green, 68 located earthquakes in July with the largest of magnitude 3.3, and no significant uplift of the North Caldera Rim since January. Those two facts sit side by side, and reconciling them is the entire point of this video. So today, we are going to break down exactly what happened that morning, why the phrase hydrothermal explosion has nothing to do with magma, what scientists are hunting for in that data right now, and which Yellowstone hazard is actually most likely to hurt somebody. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now and tell me this. Have you been to Yellowstone? And if you have, be honest, did you ever step off a boardwalk, even for a second, even just to get a better photo? No judgment. I want the real number. And tell me which basin you were in, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what is under that crust. If you want to be the first to know every time the observatory publishes something significant, subscribe right now. It is completely free. A thumbs up helps enormously. Let us go for 5,000 likes so this reaches people before their next trip rather than after. Let us walk through that morning precisely, because the sequence is remarkable. The first indication was instrumental, not visual. Just after 5:09 a.m., the Biscuit Basin equipment picked up anomalous activity. Seismic energy, plus infrasound from the general direction of Black Diamond Pool, which had itself been the site of a well-observed hydrothermal explosion on the 23rd of July 2024. The obvious assumption was that Black Diamond Pool had gone off again. The Yellowstone National Park Geology team checked the temperature sensor that records eruptions from that pool. The data showed only a very small heat blip, followed by a slow decline toward background air temperature, nothing like the rapid drop that accompanies actual eruptions of the pool. So the pool was not the source. The camera settled it. At 5:09 and 50 seconds, it recorded the dark plume erupting from the ground to the north of Black Diamond Pool. Timed exactly with the seismic and infrasound signals. Geologists were on site the next day. A few tens of meters north of the pool, they found what had happened. Large volumes of hydrothermal water had surged into the Firehole River from 3 separate sets of newly formed vents. The northernmost was a crack trending north-northwest, 18.5 meters long, about 61 feet, and up to 1.5 meters wide in places, filled with water at 90 degrees Celsius. At that elevation, water boils at 93, so this was water within 3 degrees of boiling, sitting in a fresh fissure in the ground. It was surrounded by ejected rocks, but none had traveled far, at most a few meters, which tells you the explosive energy was low compared to 2024. The middle group consisted of 5 small vents that flowed briefly and then simply steamed, still at 85 degrees the following day. The southern vent, a linear feature about 15 meters long and nearest the pool, had pushed significant water and sediment into the river and probably stopped flowing within hours, though 89-degree water remained in the fractured rubble. Now let me explain the physics, because this is the concept the entire video depends on and almost nobody explains it properly. A hydrothermal explosion is not a volcanic eruption. No magma reaches the surface. No lava is involved. What you have instead is a plumbing failure. Underneath these basins, water is heated far above the normal boiling point, but held as a liquid by the weight of the rock and water above it. The same principle as a pressure cooker, where water can sit at well over 100 degrees without turning to steam, because the lid holds the pressure in. Yellowstone's lid is the ground itself, layers of silica, cemented rock, and mineral deposit sealing the system. Break that seal through a small collapse, a shift in the plumbing, a change in water supply, and the pressure above the superheated water drops instantly. The water flashes to steam, and when liquid water becomes steam, it expands by a factor of roughly 1,700. That expansion is the explosion, It shatters the overlying rock, ejects it, and opens the vents that then bleed the system down. This is a boiler failure, not a volcano, which is why the alert level did not move, and why it should not have. Then came the part that unsettled the geologists, and it is the detail I want you to sit with. The team returned 2 days later. Between Sunday evening and Tuesday morning, a new pool had formed near the middle vent group, roughly 6.5 meters by 5 1/3, filled with vigorously boiling gray, silty water. Ground the team had walked across 2 days earlier was now an actively boiling pool. They reported notable thumping, caused by steam bubbles forming and collapsing beneath the surface, which startled them. And crucially, the pool was not surrounded by explosion debris, no ejecta, which means it did not blow open, it collapsed. The ground simply gave way into the void beneath. By Thursday the 18th, camera observations showed that pool intermittently spouting to a height of perhaps 20 to 30 feet and roiling vigorously in between. Fortunately, nobody was affected. And that word, fortunately, is where the real lesson of this video lives. Before the comparison, one piece of context that reframes the whole event. Black Diamond Pool is not an unlucky spot that has now misbehaved twice. The area around it has been the site of numerous hydrothermal explosions for more than a century. This is a chronically unstable patch of ground with a documented history, sitting in one of the most heavily visited thermal basins in the park. In 2026 alone, the observatory recorded a series of small explosions at Black Diamond Pool, several of them at night, or when the webcam lens was iced over before the June 13th event opened new ground entirely. So the question was never whether this area would explode again. It was when, how big, and who would be standing there. Let us do the comparison, because the same location produced two nearly identical events 2 years apart with completely different exposure. On the 23rd of July, 2024, a hydrothermal explosion at Black Diamond Pool sent muddy water and rocks hundreds of feet into the air. It happened in the middle of a summer day, in one of the most visited thermal areas of the park, and it destroyed a nearby boardwalk. Visitors were present. Video from that morning shows people running. Nobody was killed, and that outcome was substantially a matter of luck and geometry, where the debris happened to land relative to where people happened to be standing. The park's response was to close Biscuit Basin. On the 13th of June 2026, the same area produced another explosion, smaller, but opening 3 vent groups, throwing rock and creating a boiling pool by collapse days later on ground people would ordinarily have been walking. It happened at 5:09 in the morning, and the basin had been closed since 2024. Same ground, same mechanism, same hazard. The difference between the two outcomes was not the volcano's behavior. It was a closure decision made 2 years earlier and held through 2 full tourist seasons in one of the busiest national parks in the United States, under constant pressure to reopen a popular attraction. That is what a correctly applied precaution looks like. Nothing happens, nobody notices, and the agency gets no credit whatsoever. Now, why is this event scientifically unprecedented, and what are they actually looking for? Hydrothermal explosions are frustratingly difficult to study because they are unpredictable and almost never happen next to instruments. Yellowstone has been changing that. Continuous infrasound monitoring is now established across the park. A camera went in at Black Diamond Pool in May 2025. A monitoring station went into Biscuit Basin in the summer of 2025. The June 13th explosion happened roughly 100 meters, 328 feet, from that station. YEVO installed additional temporary seismic stations afterward to record how the new vents evolve, and stated that scientists would spend the following weeks going through the data looking for possible precursors that might have warned an explosion was imminent. That is the prize. Not prediction of a super eruption, nobody is looking for that here. The question is whether a hydrothermal explosion announces itself in the seconds, minutes, or hours beforehand in a way an instrument can detect. If it does, boardwalks and active basins could eventually be protected the way tsunami coastlines are. Think about what a positive result would actually mean. Yellowstone receives well over 4 million visitors a year, and a large share of them walk within a few meters of features capable of doing what happened at Biscuit Basin. There is currently no warning system for this hazard anywhere in the world, for the simple reason that nobody has known what to warn on. If the June 13th data contains a distinctive signal, a swarm of tiny tremors as a seal begins to fail, a shift in the infrasound hum as steam starts moving through fresh cracks, a temperature or water level change in a nearby feature, then that signal becomes a threshold. Thresholds become alarms. Alarms become closures issued minutes in advance rather than years after the fact. A negative result matters too, and scientists will publish it either way. If an explosion of this size can occur 100 meters from a modern instrument package with no detectable warning at all, that is itself critical information. It tells park management that engineering and closure decisions, not alerts, are the only protection available. The team on that paper is worth naming, because this is not anonymous science. Jefferson Hungerford, park geologist, with Kiernan Foltz-Donahue, Brandon Duchtig, Liam Rogers and Marjorie Price of the Yellowstone National Park Geology Program, Michael Poland, geophysicist with the U.S. Geological Survey and scientist in charge of the observatory, and Jamie Farrell of the University of Utah Seismograph Stations, chief seismologist of WAVO. And in July 2026, a new camera was installed with a view of both Black Diamond Pool and the June 13th explosion area, because the obvious next step, after catching one, is to be ready for the next. So when a headline says Yellowstone did something never seen before, and it is alarming, the instinct is to assume the supervolcano is stirring. Is it? The honest scientific answer is no, and the observatory's own published position is blunter than most people expect. EVO has stated plainly that a supereruption is the least likely scenario at Yellowstone. The 3 caldera-forming eruptions occurred roughly 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 631,000 years ago, and the commonly cited annual probability is on the order of 1 in 700,000. The current monitoring network, dozens of seismometers, dozens of GPS stations, satellite passes, gas measurements, would register the approach of magma to the surface as a fundamentally different signature: sustained escalating earthquake magnitudes, persistent harmonic tremor, ground uplift measured in meters rather than centimeters, and dramatic changes in gas chemistry. None of that is present. The August update describes background seismicity: 68 earthquakes in July, with the largest of magnitude 3.3 in a park that normally records between 1,500 and 2,500 a year, and caldera uplift of about a centimeter or less over recent months, possibly seasonal and related to groundwater. There is one genuinely novel observation in the record, and it is subtler than the headlines. The observatory noted that the 2025-2026 winter was the first since 2015-2016 with no caldera subsidence, suggesting a modest change in the style of caldera deformation. That is the kind of thing that goes in a bulletin, gets watched, and means very little on its own, but it is a real change. Honestly reported. Meanwhile, the hazard that actually deserves the word alarming is the one this video has been about the whole time. Hydrothermal explosions are common, they're unpredictable, and they can be enormous. Mary Bay, on the northern shore of Yellowstone Lake, is a hydrothermal explosion crater roughly 2.5 kilometers across. Formed about 13,800 years ago. No magma erupted. That crater was excavated by superheated water flashing to steam. And the deadliest event in the region's modern history was not volcanic at all. The magnitude 7.3 Hebgen Lake earthquake in August 1959 triggered a landslide that killed 28 people, most of them campers. What changed is not the volcano. What changed is that more than 4 million people a year now walk across a thin crust above water that is a few degrees below boiling. Let us be direct about the practical message here, because information without action is just anxiety. 2024 shows what a hydrothermal explosion does when visitors are present. 2026 shows what the same event does when a closure has been enforced. Mary Bay shows the upper bound of what this mechanism can excavate. Hebgen Lake shows that the region's deadliest hazard has historically been shaking, not steam. Here is what you can control, and it costs nothing. Stay on the boardwalks and the marked trails every single time, including for the photo. The crust in these basins can be centimeters thick over near boiling water, and it does not look any different from safe ground. Understand that thermal burns are by a wide margin the most common serious injury in the park, and that they happen to people who thought the ground was solid. Obey closures without negotiating with them. Biscuit Basin's closure is exactly why the June explosion injured nobody. Keep well back from any feature that is thumping, surging, or discharging more water than usual, and report it to a ranger. Keep pets leashed and children in hand, because most thermal injuries begin with somebody going in after something. And if you want the real Yellowstone risk hierarchy, bison and elk injure more visitors than every geological process in the park combined. And the volcano is nowhere near the top of the list. Final thought. Yellowstone has been running this hydrothermal system for hundreds of thousands of years, and it will keep running it long after everyone watching this is gone. Water will keep finding its way down, getting heated, getting trapped, and occasionally finding a way out in a hurry. We cannot stop that. We cannot yet predict it. What we can do is exactly what happened here. Put a camera on a pool, put a seismometer in a basin, Keep a boardwalk closed for 2 years through 2 tourist seasons, and then, when the ground opens up 100 meters from your instrument at 10 past 5 in the morning, actually have the data. The 2024 explosion was survived. The 2026 explosion was recorded. That is the difference between being lucky and being ready, and it is the whole story of this channel and 2 events on the same patch of ground. The most alarming thing about the 13th of June is not that the ground exploded. It is that a team of geologists walked across a patch of ordinary-looking earth on a Sunday, and by Tuesday morning that patch was a boiling pool. The data is being read right now. If there were precursors, we are about to know what they sound like. We will keep tracking every bulletin as it comes. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And leave that comment below. Have you been to Yellowstone? And did you ever step off the boardwalk? Because these are not just geological events. They are human decisions.